Hey, it's Diaperperv.
Hey, how you doing? I'm Livewire.
And today we're going to talk about red flags and things that you should look for that could mean it's a toxic or dangerous ABDL relationship or dynamic.
Right, you really got to protect yourself and be aware there are people that don't have great intentions, and as soon as you recognize it, you better have an exit plan and a strategy to save yourself a lot of misery.
This video is going to be like an hour long because there's so many things, and we've personally seen and experienced a lot of these things as well. There are predators who see littles and ABDLs as being very positive and responding quickly to attention, and they want to please. So some littles they don't get a lot of attention, and they don't have a lot of people that accept them for who they are. So when they see someone accepting them for who they are, they're like, oh my goodness, and they kind of latch on and dive in without thinking about it, without negotiating, without getting to know the person. And sometimes there are people who will take advantage of that.
Right, and I have personally heard a dominatrix a long time ago had told me ABs make the absolute worst submissives because she's saying, I don't know how to deal with them. They're doing this, they're doing that. And I thought, well, that's crazy. This is when I was first, coming up myself and things. And to hear that, I didn't quite understand why. But I understand that it's part of the, AB personality to look for an experienced big, maybe even a middle, big brother, big sister in the age play dynamic, and to be trusting, wanting to please, wanting to hear a good girl, and sometimes they don't get that.
And sometimes it's just a mismatch of top and bottom person, like this dom, right? Why is the dom looking for littles to be their subs or slaves? They're littles, they're not subs or slaves.
Right. Maybe
some are as well, and they enjoy that dynamic, but for them to just assume or to try and force somebody into that narrative, and it goes the other way too. There are littles and ABDLs who see a big person who's a dominant person in something else that's not age play, and they're like, oh, maybe I can get them to be my caregiver, if I do these other things. And with that intent, that is not the truest intent, because it wasn't negotiated before.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense, exactly what you said, and how they lure people in is just as important as how you separate yourself if this happens to you, because they're going to be charming, they're going to be like everything that you could possibly want. You might be head over heels about this person, but you really need to pay attention to the red flags that we're going to go over. And this isn't each and everything like, hey, this is super bad. We're just talking in general of red flags to protect people, to enrich and educate your knowledge.
A person who does not take accountability for what they do.
Which is, just not rogering up to going, hey, I made a mistake, and just blaming and maybe excuses, and maybe even pushing the blame onto the little, or the AB, so to speak, as in like a vicious circle, almost like an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
Very tyrant-like.
And that is kind of like gaslighting, which is another red flag too, by not taking accountability and saying, oh, well, you told me this, when they in fact didn't tell you that.
Right.
That's one form of gaslighting.
And going with accountability, there could be some manipulation in there, as in like they're telling you one thing, maybe a little bribe, whatever. Maybe you're not getting what you want, which means we're back to negotiations, which should have been pretty much step one after you've learned somebody's name, after you start talking about common interests. Negotiations surely come in somewhere in there at that point.
But a lot of these dynamics, they don't come into play, and that's where
Right.
issues may arise. So another one is the way they express their anger makes you feel unsafe.
Right. Huge red flag, because unsafe anger is on the borderline of violence. It can be that. I'm not saying that everything is, but a little emotional outburst, throwing things around, it's not too far away from physical violence, and you don't know. So if people are tripping offline like that, you really need to be aware of how they handle their emotions.
Yeah, because, sure, they might be like throwing things and breaking them at a wall right now, but it could be at you in the future when they feel more comfortable around you.
Right.
Number 3, they push your boundaries in unsafe ways.
If they're not listening to maybe what your injuries are, what your likes or dislikes are, because you have to have a lot of trust. And once trust is established, the submissive has a lot of power in going, hey, it's, red, I'm not comfortable with doing this. And if somebody's like pushing you, there's a difference between gentle encouragement or you will do this. And that's huge, because the submissive gives consent. The submissive has the most power in the power exchange dynamic.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that when they're new into any type of power exchange dynamic.
Right. And another thing too is it goes back into manipulation. If, say for example, you're like, hey, I don't really feel cool with this, they may say, well, you're not being a good slave, or you're not slave material, and berate you, manipulate you into what they want. Therefore, they're pushing your boundaries in an unsafe way.
Right, and they shouldn't be saying that to you. And these are real life examples that we know from someone who had very predatory ways in this community.
Right.
But they're not part of this community. Number 6, responding poorly when you take your time away from them. Everyone has lives. Not everyone can do this 24/7, and there are designated times when they can and will be able to do this.
Right. A top or a dynamic, a dom, a daddy, whoever's in that role should be very encouraging, because nobody should be doing kink 24/7 unless that's what you enjoy and what you are doing. But there, like Perv said, there's outside activities. Maybe you like theater, maybe you like running, maybe you like going to concerts. There really shouldn't be any jealousy if you're not spending the exact amount of time that somebody wants, because you need breaks. I always go by, people need time to miss each other. If you're really in a good relationship, you miss somebody when they're away from you. But if you're around them all the time, people need space, and they need to be encouraged to do other things besides just kink.
Like a good top should be encouraging their bottom to be the best person they can be, and to push them into doing things that are good for them and good for their mental health and their learning. So this kind of leads into being controlling and having jealousy issues, which is a result of you not wanting to spend more time with them, or having your own life.
Yeah. Beware of manipulation. Beware of guilt trips. And like maybe pouty behavior, or however they express jealousy issues. They may be putting unfair time schedules on you, like you need to come pick me up and be here at this time, and just crazy things like that. I'm sure there's a million ways
that would disrupt your life normally, or be hindrance to your real life.
Right.
So we actually asked somebody who had a bad experience with this predator that was here, and she came up with a good list of red flags that she personally saw, and she's sharing them with us.
Right. So the first one is, all your exes are crazy and you are not at fault at all, which is just zero accountability, I'm the victim. Everybody else is wrong, but me.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, that's just, okay, I could see one person, maybe, you might believe that. But when it's like 4 or 5 or 6 and the number's growing and maybe your whole city is speaking about this person in an unsafe way, you might want to listen.
Okay. Number 2, this person always bragged about screwing people over. Yeah, why would you want to screw someone over in the first place? Like, you can already tell their intention is not good.
Right, we're supposed to be a community of giving and sharing, give and take, encouragement, safety, consensual behavior, and just bragging about screwing people over, like that level of negative energy, why would anybody want to be around that? So if that's happening to you, that's kind of a sign to kind of listen and maybe make some changes, or maybe talk to some other people and get advice.
Mm-hmm. And also, whenever they would play your scene, there was no negotiation. They would play and only have the act without the build-up.
Right. Another thing too is if you've done a really good scene, or maybe it was just a flogging, or maybe it was something a little bit more painful, and there was no level of aftercare afterwards. Some people can achieve subspace, little space, others can't. Some people are in very super vulnerable positions when they're in that space, and they might need cuddle time. They might need gentle talking, and to just go from 0 to 60 and stop on a dime, then you're going to experience like some sub drop, and maybe you're not verbal and things like that. So that goes right into that thing with the whole act and not following through.
Violating consent in little ways to make you feel comfortable accepting those violations in bigger ways in the future. That's true. That's like pushing boundaries a little bit at a time and not just pushing a huge boundary.
Yeah. It's kind of like little speed bumps until you get to the edge of the cliff. Like, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just a little issue of consent. But then there's another one, and now you start to see a pattern developing. It's just, it's very unhealthy in that type of relationship. It really erodes trust.
And the last one, only playing in public spaces. So I think that happened to her. And I feel like the top person only did that to show off.
Exactly.
But she didn't really live the lifestyle.
Right. And that was it. This person seemed to shine, like, look at me, look what I'm doing in all this public spaces to look good for her peers.
Yeah.
But personal play, private play was never between the two, if that makes sense. And, that's really showy, in my opinion. Like, when you start doing a scene like that, everybody likes a public scene, like, oh, what are they doing? Oh, that looks interesting. But when you're going over the top and you're talking about it and look at me, are you really into that person, or you're into your own personal gain?
So how do we prevent these things from happening? Well, you can't prevent all of them from happening, because that would mean that everybody knew how to communicate effectively and there were no predators at all trying to take advantage of people. So we can give you some tips. Like, one is to be honest with yourself and what you want and the other person. Have you had a bad experience in the past? It's okay to tell the other person.
Right. I think you know yourself better than anybody else. And what were your goals going to those relationships? Have you even come close to achieving any of them? Have you ever had, maybe a fantasy fulfilled? Has that person listened to what your fantasies might be, or you did things together that achieved that trust and closeness that you're striving for in the first place? And if you haven't, that's when you take notice. That's when you got to start thinking of an exit strategy, a graceful one. You're not throwing somebody under the bus, but hey, this is not working out, and you start distancing yourself in whatever way you think is necessary.
Negotiate and communicate. So these are I see them as kind of two different things that roll into the same thing. So negotiate, like, for example, what happened here, the littles would take whatever order from this person in hopes that they would get something back, that they would get little time, that they would get like an iota of what they wanted because they weren't getting it. And this person just flat out didn't care.
Right.
So it's important to say, hey, if I do this for you, then I would like this back. I would like little time. I would like a caregiver and this type of dynamic.
Right. I think it's only fair to negotiate like that. And don't think that you're holding something over this person's head. Like if I do your chores or I help you clean your house or something like that, maybe we could pursue this. Because you don't ever want to pressure somebody into a scene, but at the same time, negotiating is fair play.
Right, because they're asking something of you.
Right. And sometimes people who are just coming up, like we talked about earlier, might not know everything about negotiations, and they think that, well, this is how it should go because this person's a top. But it's not always the case.
No, there are tops that try to take advantage of people.
Right.
Especially in this case that happened here.
Right.
And it's not just one case. It's like cases with the same person here.
And it doesn't have to be service. It could be money. It could be gifts. It could be rides. It could be various different things. And you'll know. You're going to know.
Well, no, you don't know. Because sometimes they won't know until way after the fact, until they felt used or abused or taken advantage of, and then they're angry about it.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, now they're negotiating to get out of this. They're going to know that they were taken advantage of and realize it.
Yeah.
But, I get what you're saying. And, it's hard, too. It's not easy because littles really want a nice caregiver, and they're vulnerable. They're probably the most vulnerable aspect of the kink world.
Yes.
Because they're very trusting and they can latch on, like Perv said earlier, to anybody that's responsible in a role that they identify with. And their vulnerability makes them an easy target sometimes.
Yes, yeah. And the last one that I put was don't assume anything. So, case in point, don't assume that this dominant top person even wants to be a caregiver, wants to be your caregiver, is into the same things you are. I think that could have been avoided, all these cases that happened here.
Because there's certain, I'm going to say slang for lack of a better word, that they should have knowledge on. They should have maybe diapers or have a general indication of what the best brands are or where to get them and things like that. Like if you're talking to somebody and they're talking about their interest, you're going to know, that they know what they're talking about if they're not having the same level of knowledge that you have. Now, granted, there's learning curve, whatever, but if they're way off, that should give you a little alert.
Here's some more red flags that someone from Fetlife wrote about, and these are really awesome. So, one of them is sometimes people will pretend to be into what you're into for a quick vanilla hookup, and they're not into it at all. And I've had this happen to me as a top. I've had people, I guess, see like, oh, she's a girl. Oh, she's a girl, and maybe I can hook up with her if I can, if I pretend to be into this or just say yes to it. They don't get fetish.
Yeah.
I need the fetish. I'm not interested in hooking up with someone. I hate swearing. Okay.
I get the soap. I'm gonna go get the liquid soap. My favorite red flag on Fetlife is people who are men calling themselves master just because they can think that it's easy sex. They get to boss a girl around,
Yeah.
and they have zero knowledge about kink.
Yeah.
It's all about sex. That's a huge red flag entering a
Yes.
relationship, because it's not like that. You know, the power exchange is not there. The person just wants sex, and they have no interest in learning rope or whatever things that you may be into.
Oh wait, okay, just one little thing. I don't think that's the red flag. What is, because a red flag is like seeing something before it happens, right?
Yeah.
So if you already got used for like vanilla sex without the fetish, then how do you know that this person is lying?
That's a good point.
Right?
Yeah, no, that,
Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think when they're not enthusiastic about it, like in my experience as a top, I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm into this fetish. And if they say something like, yeah, I'll try that.
Oh yeah.
No, I mean, they're obviously not into it.
Yeah, I think the famous one-line messages are a huge red flag. Like, hey slut, blah blah blah.
Slut.
Yeah, I mean, that's what people get messages on Fetlife, and they're like, what? You know?
Oh, gee.
Yeah, they copy and paste that to like 50 women.
Do you get messages like that?
No.
No, okay.
I get cool messages on Fetlife, honestly.
Everybody message him on Fetlife.
Oh,
Hey
yeah.
slut. Hey diaper slut.
Oh my god, I'm going to forward them all to you. God, we kind of went on a tangent there.
We did, but in reality, we did have someone who came into the ABDL scene
Right.
and saw people she could take advantage of.
Right, and this person was heard to say that she didn't understand or didn't like littles. I don't want to say the wrong information, but it was something like that. And, you know, when you're going to all the munches in town and you're a pro and you want to drum up business, sometimes the intentions are good, sometimes they're bad. But we're speaking genuinely on the subject because we're not going to lie. We're going to tell the truth because we're trying to help people.
Right, and we saw real people that we know get hurt and feel used.
And it's not cool. And I honestly feel very sad for the people who got hurt because some of them are scared.
And it sucks because after a bad experience, they may not want to get out there again, or they may not want to trust people again, or not know how to trust people.
Right, trust issues, things like that. And I will say too that we're lucky that we have our ABDL munch, and it's a very strong ABDL littles munch. Everybody seems to get along. Everybody's in contact with each other. We're doing a lot more events, and Perv and the community is building a stronger, safer community. So people can speak to each other for advice, or, hey, do you know about this person, or whatever. And it's not gossip, it's just looking out for each other in a safe way. Are you okay? You know, that's really awesome when you can rely on somebody.
Yes, so other cities try and do the same thing, like build good connections and keep in touch with one another and make sure that people are okay.
Right.